When it's too tough for them, it's just right for us.
Where would you rather be than right here, right now?
The Rockpile Report with Buffalo Bills season ticket holder Drew Gear.
The Bills make me wanna shout.
Two great times for him. I see Richie Incognito. I mean, they both have this nasty edge. They're maulers in the run game, and you think they're not going to be real good pass protection because of their feet, but they've got really solid feet. I think Hernandez is the day one starter in the NFL, and you want to get in a fight in the phone booth? That's the guy right there, Will Hernandez.
Whoa! Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Rockpile Report podcast. I am your host, Buffalo Bills season ticket holder Drew Gear. To my right is my producer, Chris Kruger, and that was Mike Mayotte. Talking about guard prospect Will Hernandez being compared to current Bills guard Richie Incognito. Oh, yeah, we have a ton of stuff for you tonight, folks.
We'll find out about Hernandez a little bit later. Hernandez.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. Hernandez a little bit later. Russ Brown. Cover1.net, Cover One the podcast. We'll talk to him about the offensive line.
And the defensive line coming up in this year's draft.
And I just solidified, because we're not having a goddamn party, I just solidified my draft night plans. Let me tell you.
Do tell. What are you going to be doing? Instead of watching it with me, as we do annually, what are you going to be doing for the NFL draft this year?
You're going to be in Jamaica, so my option is, I'll just
fly to Jamaica, hang out with me in a Speedo, everything will be cool.
I don't even want to leave the country, so that's a whole nother discussion. This is what I'm doing. Night one of the draft, Thursday night. Traft Music Hall? Traft Music Hall? Whatever's next to Shay's downtown. What's next to Shay's downtown?
Traft. The Trelf.
Yeah. Papa Chubby. I'll be there. My parents coming into town for the weekend. My dad's a huge fan of Papa Chubby. You're going to be in another country, so I'm not going to watch. It could be like 2 years ago when we drafted Shaq Lawson. I totally bailed on Drew's draft party to go to Jack Devine's with somebody I met off of Tinder.
Yeah.
And I got lucky up top.
Chris, it's been over a year since you got laid. Don't high-five me.
God.
Folks, we've officially reached the 1 year point for Chris. Somebody help this man. Also, your draft night plans are fucking lame. You've got a lot of problems, sir.
Well, you're not here. You're not here. You're in another country.
It's literally me or your parents. That's what we've come to as a podcast.
They called me.
As friends, we've come to it's me or your family.
Look,
that's it. That's all you have?
Yeah, look, my mom called me on Thursday night and goes, you know how Dad likes Papa? There's some blues guitarist called Papa Chubby, and he's playing in Bob. It's how dumb.
If my mother ever calls me and says your father likes Papa Chubby, I'm gonna hang up the phone, and that's it.
Well,
that's a wrap.
No, this is how
that's a wrap because you don't.
No, this is how dumb they are. Because they called me. They're like, he's playing in Buffalo on that Thursday night, and then he's playing in Geneseo on Friday night, and we want to get tickets to the Geneseo show because the Buffalo show is sold out. And I go, oh, yeah. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Where's he playing at Geneseo? And they're telling me all about the Geneseo show, and I'm on Ticketmaster Googling Papa Chubby Buffalo. And when my mom finishes her sentence, I go, I'm on Ticketmaster. I'm one click away from buying tickets to the Buffalo show. You don't know how to use technology. His show in Buffalo is not sold out. Learn how to use technology. Go get tickets to his Buffalo show. We'll go to that because Drew's going to Jamaica because some idiot decides to get married draft weekend.
Folks, this is how desperate things have gotten for Chris. Instead of watching the draft with other people, he's decided to go hang out with his mother and father.
Who am I going to watch it with?
Something involving what sounds like erections. Guys, I don't even know what to say about this anymore. We're going to move on, and we're going to hit this week's Bills News Update. This week, the owners and head coaches met for one of their yearly league meetings. And usually when this happens, it's customary that they all get together and they talk about ratifying changes to the rules. Now, I'll say this. Out of everything that they have going on for them, the one thing they have is that they're pretty much the boss.
We make the rules, not you.
Having said that, I'm looking at a bunch of rule changes that honestly reflect the fact that they acknowledge that 2017 sucked balls from an officiating standpoint.
Look, as long as they change that catch rule, because that was just egregious.
Well, this is it. Sometimes when you think about changes to the rules of how football gets played, sometimes they're made simply because the league wants to experiment. I mean, that's evidenced by their constant tweaking of the overtime rules over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. Other times they change things because they've gathered information that makes them believe that they can make moves that will make players safer. Kind of like what we've seen with the kick return rules. But other times, those rule changes come because either a team found a loophole and abused it, or something was blatantly obvious to fans everywhere as being officiated poorly, and the league has no response to it other than to change the rule to react to that. And from the looks of it, the latter seems to be in vogue. I mean, Chris, the first words out of your mouth were the catch rule. That is the rule that's going to get the most press. I mean, that's it. Well, Everyone is angry about the catch rule.
Well, I go to the Jesse James catch before I go to Kelvin Benjamin. Like that Jesse James catch for the touchdown against New England at the end of the season, which ultimately ended up being what home field advantage was. I mean, Pittsburgh didn't get far because
Pittsburgh
they
didn't
lost.
Get that far.
You lost to Blake Bortles, but that Jesse James touchdown was egregious. That should have been a touchdown.
Egregious. You just sounded like Frank Caliendo's reenactment of Jim Rome.
Arugula.
What I'll say is this. The change that has gotten the most press is the simplified catch rule. Because every fan here listening to this podcast remembers that momentum-robbing touchdown pass to Kelvin Benjamin against the Patriots. I mean, it left every fan everywhere, as well as refs, coaches, and NFL pundits around the country just scratching their heads. Nobody knew what to call it.
You even heard it in the Super Bowl with the Corey Clement touchdown. Chris Collinsworth was like,
that was a makeup call for a year's worth of bullshit that went the Patriots' way. God, I just flailed so hard. I think I broke my forearm.
Yeah, you broke it on my window, you idiot. I specifically remember.
What a jerk.
I specifically remember Collinsworth saying in the Super Bowl, I have no idea what a catch is.
Oh, I'm chicken winged. All right.
Do you want my sling?
No, I don't want your fucking sling because I'm not a pussy like you. All right. So ultimately, though, when you look over it, yes, there are a million nuances to the new catch rule that could complicate things. And in its early stages, it could lead to more reviews. But anybody who's bitching about it needs to just stop. Because I'm pretty sure you were the same person who was screaming at the TV last year. Like we were. Begging for a change. Do something differently because what's happening right now isn't working. Well, guess what? Beggars can't be choosers, so deal with it. Now, one of the most underrated changes, in my opinion, is going to be the new helmet contact rule. I mean, that's something where not only can a defensive player be penalized for making helmet-to-helmet contact, but an offensive player who puts himself purposely in harm's way. And this makes me think of Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell is a running back who is very adept at burying his head at opportune moments and digging out extra yardage because people are afraid to take shots at him. Now, he can be penalized for that. It changes the landscape of how current running backs play the game. And the one thing I think is I look at LaShawn McCoy. I've seen very few runs where LaShawn McCoy ever buries his head. His head is always on a swivel and he's looking to make a cut for extra yardage.
It makes you think what's going to happen on 3rd and 3.
Well, exactly.
And you have Chris Ivory in the game,
Short
who's
yardage
north-south.
plays like that raises a question. How will that affect play calling come the next season? I mean, that's an underrated change to the game because when you go to get 1 yard, if your running back lowers his helmet and intentionally contacts another, let's say he hits a linebacker helmet to helmet, that's a 15-yard penalty. That's it. Helmet to helmet contact. Now you're absolutely punting the ball. You're trying a Hail Mary pass and then you're punting. And that's it. It's going to change the way football gets played. But the biggest, in my mind, is the new rule on ejections. Now I understand that the national media's attention is focused on the cheap shot by Marshawn Lattimore on Mike Evans last season. And they might even go to the helmet-to-helmet shot that Travis Kelce got in the playoffs against the Titans that looked intentional but wasn't penalized. I and most Bills fans probably remember the time last season where Rob Gronkowski gave Trey White the Macho Man flying elbow on the sidelines and wasn't kicked out of the game. The fan outrage was overwhelming, and justifiably so. But to me, this rule change might just be taking things a little too far. And Chris, think about it in terms of this. Football is a game of context. When a play-action pass goes for a big gain or a touchdown bomb, people fall in love with the highlight reel. But it doesn't happen without the defense being conditioned to bite on 10 previous running plays. That's the way personal fouls work in the NFL. It's rare that a player who's been unagitated commits an egregious personal foul. Now, I'll say this. The Gronk situation, yes, that was unprovoked. All it was a penalty, but you can look at the context and say, well, Rob thought he was getting interfered with. Is that enough to not eject him? I don't think so. I think he should have been ejected from that game. I mean, he buried a guy who was completely defenseless.
There's no way to defend that play to where Gronk stays in that game.
No, exactly.
He should have been ejected, regardless of our homerisms.
But now here's what makes me scared about this new rule. Think about the personal foul that got called against Denver during that Bills win over Denver that we thought was impossible, right? The stadium was hotter than Satan's asshole. So I don't know if maybe that contributed to it, but Von Miller offers Tyrod Taylor a hand up off the ground after a play. And then, like a middle schooler, pulls it away at the last second and laughs. But guess what? Both players were laughing about the play when they inevitably ended up on their feet. And then, out of nowhere, a flag comes flying in. A referee who was not standing right there and did not understand the context of the moment threw a flag that changed the course of the game because we got an extra first down and inevitably scored on that drive, which gave us the go-ahead score and we inevitably won the game. That happened because that official didn't take a second to just, put themselves in the situation. Does there seem like there's any aggression between the two guys? Does it seem like, this one guy pulled something that's childish, but they're both having fun. They're enjoying the moment. That's a personal foul? Are you fucking crazy? The same mindset behind that call will now be behind the decision to eject players from a football game. I'm not okay with this. Anybody who thinks that's a good idea is an idiot, in my opinion. It's almost like the catch rule. The only reason that they're amending it is because the people or persons enforcing it aren't equipped or qualified to do so. So instead of educating those people on the way it should be done and then replacing the ones who can't get on board, they're simply changing the rules to try to make it, so we have these subpar officials and these subpar video reviewers, and we're just going to make the rules easier for them to enforce. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of.
Well, look in the context. When you talk about like personal fouls, who better to dish out those on the Bills than Jerry Hughes.
All I can say is fuck El Riveron to hell with this rule change. Okay? I'm not in agreement with it. Mark my words. There is going to come a game this coming season, 2018, where a Bills player is ejected for doing something that we don't deem as a flagrant abuse of the rules. And it won't come from the field. It'll come from somewhere off in another state, over the telephone, and
New York.
It'll leave Bills fans everywhere pissed off. But it's going to leave us with nothing but some faceless entity to blame for it. And I feel like I've already had enough of that in terms of football for one lifetime. That's it, Chris. I can't take anymore. Shifting gears. The Bills roster is still taking shape. I mean, when you take a look at the free agent market, it's obviously cooled a little bit. But that doesn't mean that teams still aren't digging to kind of tweak and upgrade their rosters. The Bills' own free agent class has finally started making the rounds. I mean, no one that we were losing this offseason was a priority free agent for another team. You know, we lost Stephon Gilmore in the first couple days of free agency last year. That's the first time that's happened to the Bills in a long time. And now we're here a different year. We're talking about marginal players at best. I mean, wide receiver Jordan Matthews. That made headlines because he visited with the Packers. And they recently cut Jordy Nelson. Quarterback E.J. Gaines signs a contract with the Cleveland Browns. And Sharice Wright found a gig with the Raiders. And wide receiver Deontay Thompson turned down an offer from the Bills in order to sign with Dallas. I mean, I don't know what any of that means, except for this. Trust that changes are going to continue coming for this Bills roster. I mean, as of this recording today.
Who thought that E.J. Gaines would be back when we signed Vontae Davis?
No, I didn't.
Exactly.
And
not surprising he went to...
when you look at the contract he signed, I'm not surprised either. He's not worth a lot. But the Bills value availability more than, hey, when you're here, you're great. But you might miss 6 games. And those 6 games might cost us the playoffs. I can't invest in you as a starter.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, go miss those games on the other side of the fucking lake.
What I'll say is that as of this recording, we currently have more running backs on the roster than we do cornerbacks. And there still isn't anyone on the roster that I would trust as a starting middle linebacker as of week 1 tomorrow. And our defensive tackle group only has 3 guys who have taken an NFL snap. There are going to be more free agent visits to come, so everyone needs to calm down. I mean, we just recently visited with cornerback Phillip Gaines. The guy, 4 seasons with Kansas City, and last year he was Pro Football Focus's 3rd worst rated cornerback out of 122 qualifying candidates. I mean, that's not exactly an inspiring depth option, but at the same time, he's got a lot of athleticism. His athleticism is off the charts, which is why he was a 3rd-round draft pick by Kansas City. Their fans hate this guy, but a lot has been said about how he could be better suited to playing in a zone scheme than a man-press scheme, and thus he could come in here cheap and provide us with talented depth. At the same time, you look at the middle linebacker market. We have recently met with 3 middle linebacker candidates. Kevin Minter, Carlos Dansby, and Will Compton.
I'd tell you right now, Dansby would be a great signing 7 years ago.
I was going to say, Jesus Christ. I mean, with Dansby, he'd be a good signing if we had a fucking time machine and could go back to 2013 when he had 6.5 sacks, 114 tackles, and 14 defended passes. At this point, he's an old man who is in no way, shape, or form trusted to hold down the middle of a 4-3 defense as a starting middle linebacker. He's not. He's a slightly better Brandon Spikes at this point in his career. Now, on the other hand, Will Compton. Compton probably represents the most athletic of the 3 options, but he's only been a starter for 1 year in his career. The guy's got special teams experience, though, and that, Chris, in my mind, leads me to believe that the Bills are probably leaning towards him. Because even if he doesn't land the job as, hey, this is our starting linebacker, we don't draft a guy, we just go into week one with him as our starter. According to, I've just been reading around, Jacob, I don't want to butcher his last name, Chemiker from Fansided. He thinks, he's a Redskins beat reporter. He thinks that Buffalo represents the best fit for Will Compton. Because while his tackling isn't top-notch, his range and athleticism makes him a 3-down starter if you can put him behind a strong defensive line. That's what Buffalo just built, signing Kyle Williams and Starlotulele.
Latulele.
So they can.
Mario's going to beat the shit out of you for the next 5 years.
Here's
over
the thing
that.
I like about Will Compton. You can sign him, and even if he doesn't, let's say you draft, a top-tier starting linebacker, you can still have this guy on your roster as not only valuable middle linebacker depth, but also, hey, he can play special teams because he's done it his whole career. That's a solid get. And the last guy is Kevin Minter, who, honestly, he's experienced as a starter, but he's never had any real success to this point in his career. And he's fresh off a trip to the IR. He never lived up to his second-round status, kind of like Kiko Alonso, and has a depressed market because of his down year in Cincy. Ultimately, I'd be okay with a Minter signing, but I'm not going to exactly do a backflip. It is what it is.
Well, didn't he go to LSU? Reed talked him up on our show.
He did. He liked Kevin Minter, but guess what?
Obviously, because he went to LSU.
He's just a dude. Now, there's going to be more moves coming, and I'll forecast this for you guys. Wide receiver position is something to keep an eye on because there's a lot of talented young depth out there that just because of the draft coming, teams have kind of made their early moves. Now there's a freeze on the market, and they're going to wait and see how the draft falls. And then free agency is going to start moving again. I expect the Bills to be involved in that second wave of free agency. I don't see them drafting wide receivers. I just don't. At the same time, defensive tackles.
Can we put a Seagrams on that?
Yes.
Seagrams.
Bills don't draft a wide receiver in the first 4 rounds.
Oh, no. No.
See?
You try to cover your ass. You just said that you don't think they would draft one, so you put it on the whole draft.
Fine.
Don't try to mark it down to the first 4 rounds.
All right, asshole. For
dick.
your sake, since you've lost so many to me this year, I'll give it to you. Secondly, defensive tackle. Right now, we only have 3 defensive tackles on the roster that have NFL experience. Some guy named Hatley is our 4th defensive tackle. He is not going to be on this roster come September. So the question is, what do you do? What do you do to flesh out that position heading into training camp? I think the Bills are confident they can land a depth contributor in the draft, and then they want to see how the free agent market plays out after the draft in that second wave. There's a lot of guys whose agents probably aren't willing to sign a contract right now because they want to maximize their client's value. They know their guys are fit for a certain scheme. They know, like Quentin Dial. A guy like Quentin Dial only really played in the 3-4. Okay? So he's limited as to where he can go. So since nobody's called him, he's going to take all of his offers out there. He's going to walk away from the table for now. After the draft, he'll come back to all these teams who were probably angling for a D tackle in the draft and didn't get one. And he'll say, look, I'm still a versatile player for you. And that's how that's going to work. It's going to be something very much worth looking into because our roster is going to change so much between today and the start of the 2018 season. All right, folks, and with that in mind, as we talk about how the roster has kind of taken shape and changed over the course of the last few weeks, we have a very special guest on tonight to kind of talk about that topic with us. Guys, joining us live from traffic in Chicago, we have Lars from the Bills and Beers podcast. How are you doing, sir?
Doing great.
Now, what is the stretch of highway that you're...
It's an 8-lane highway, pretty much dead stop right now, and I'm flanked right now by a bowl to the projects that surround them, so it's a view. It's a gorgeous view from where I'm sitting right now.
Look at that. He's got great company. He's got great vistas to purvey. Life is good for Lars. Now,
That's right.
First and foremost, the most important question of the day, how is Miss Cass?
So I got to get the update on that, but hopefully you guys will be able to connect a little bit if you can call in during your destination wedding on draft night.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm telling you, I will be highly available because I'm pretty sure my fiance will want nothing to do with me that night.
I was actually at a rehearsal dinner the night we drafted EJ Manuel.
Oh, my God. I've never
Yeah.
I was at a bar and I've never heard the air come out of a room so fast. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the theater where Lincoln got shot didn't go dead as quickly as the bar I was in when EJ Manuel got drafted. It was awful.
Yeah, when you look back on it, that was such a bizarre draft, though. I mean, not just from a Bills standpoint, but I think like 12 of the top 15 players taken that year aren't in the league anymore.
It's incredible. It's just what a terrible year to try to pick a quarterback.
Yeah, they went for it.
So I got to ask, with your podcast, now you guys don't have a weekly format outside of the season the way we do. So for our listeners who might be interested in checking out your show, what do you guys have planned for this offseason? I know you just recently did a podcast where you kind of talked about, free agency pickups and things of that nature. What else do you guys have coming down the pipeline for the rest of the offseason?
Yeah, we'll be doing a show draft night. Probably right after the first round ends, just so we know that the Bills are done for the night. Because I imagine there's going to be a lot to talk about that night, or, depending on what happens, because something big's going to happen or something's not going to happen. And either way, that's going to be a topic of interest for most Bills fans. Mm-hmm. Then beyond that, we'll probably maybe get together over the summer once around training camp, then again during the preseason, and then weekly once the season gets going.
Guys, if you haven't already, Bills and Beers podcast, you got to go over and check it out. Now, there's two topics that I guess I've just been burning to kind of talk about / fight with you over. So
Bring it.
First and foremost, and I know you're not afraid. I know you're not afraid to argue, which is I love this because Chris, I end up winning most of my football arguments with Chris. So Chris is scowling right now as I say this. So first and foremost, all of the preseason talk about tanking last season.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, where did you stand on the concept?
I thought it was pretty clear that they weren't tanking. I didn't really have an opinion on it, but I just want them to go. Look, if it was clear that they were tanking, then fine, great, let's do it. Let's tank and let's go after it. But it wasn't very clear to me that they were tanking. It seemed that they were still trying to win ball games. And I know why you're asking me this. So I will say, though, that that's not a totally accurate depiction of my attitude on this, which is to say there are many times during the season last year on our podcast that we very regrettably talked about the fact that the Bills were pulling out some squeakers all season long, and every time we did, it was like, okay, well, I thought the plan was to get a quarterback in 2018, and it's cool that we're winning these games, and it's cool that Andy Dalton made a miracle play on 4th and Forever and the drought's over, but we were really close to having 2 really great draft picks, and now we kind of don't, and we have to do a lot of work. And now we look at the position they're in, even after getting to 12, there's probably 5 teams between them at 12 and 22 who want a quarterback who could leapfrog us. There's no less than 3 teams in front of us between 1 and 12 that also want a quarterback. So we're not exactly in a position right now to have the pick of the litter. Now, I also don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think each one of these quarterbacks is compromised in some way. It seems that everybody's got like their great butt, and what it all comes down to, do we trust this regime to scout and find the right guy? And if he's there, do you go all in on him? And I do, but I don't necessarily know for sure that quarterback's there. So in hindsight, you can look back and say, great, it was awesome. We killed the drought. We had a winning season, did a lot of great things in Coach McDermott's first year. But at the same time, you're looking at it like, you can't tell me that this was the plan. This is not what they set out to do. Well, sorry. I now it sounds like I'm contradicting myself. They didn't plan to tank, but they also didn't plan to make the playoffs. They went out to win ball games. But, I mean, geez, Louise, the way we won some of those games with Hauschka making field goals from 60 yards out, and like the OPI against Indianapolis in the snow. I mean, that was the difference between us breaking the drought or not, and it also ultimately was the difference between like drafting at 21 and at 11. which is a big difference.
So and so knowing this, now I had to endure. Now see, I'm of the mindset that this is the NFL. You win. I mean, as a fan, I can't root for a loss. There's certain things I can't root for. I'm physically not capable of rooting for a Bills loss, and I am physically incapable of rooting for a Patriots win, even when it's a good thing for me. I mean, I found that out the year that Rex Ryan played the Patriots in the playoffs. Me and my ex-girlfriend made a pact before the game that we hated Rex Ryan. We spent all day talking about it. And okay, these Patriots are going to kick his head in. And it's going to be great. We're going to watch it. We're going to celebrate Rex Ryan losing. And the moment the Jets kicked off and they stapled the guy who decided to bring the ball out of the end zone, the Jets did, and I cheered. I jumped off the couch because I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm jumping ship at kickoff. I cannot physically root for the Patriots. In the same way, I can't root for a Bills loss ever. So,
no, I can't either. I mean, we got 17 games this year, but we normally only get 16 games. You got to wait 9 months in between them. So no, of course, there's such precious little time to sit and enjoy it.
So knowing
of course
that,
you want them to win.
Chris spent the entire offseason and most of the regular season battling me tooth and nail over the fact that we should be tanking. We shouldn't be cheering that we lost these games. Sometimes he was downright angry that we won. Chris, do you want to try to defend this position?
Not really. Well, I just want a quarterback. Quarterback's the only position that's going to mask your deficiencies elsewhere. So I still think I would trade whatever it takes to get up into the top 5 to get a quarterback this year that could set us up. If we hit on him, because I don't know if we can hit on a quarterback. If we hit on a quarterback, we're good for the next 12 to 15 years.
So with that being said, the last thing I got to ask in this before we move on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you enjoy the playoff berth? I mean, the drought is dead. So even that shrewd part of you that wants that quarterback and wants to say, look, life would be so easy if we lost. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you enjoy knowing that the drought is officially over?
Yeah, it's definitely nice to not have that punchline at our expense any longer. Mm-hmm. And of course, like the 7 days between New Year's Eve and the day that we burned 3 whole points against the Jacksonville Jaguars, it was awesome. Like listening to the stories of people caravanning down to Jacksonville and all the people who are calling into WGR and losing their minds and all the Twitter videos and everything. Like it was great. It was completely incredible for those 7 days. And then, Tyrod Taylor put up 3 points against the Jags, and it's like, oh, cool. That's what all that. Okay, cool. Thanks, Tyrod. So, yeah, we were real sad to see him go when the Browns took him.
Right. Oh, my God, we talked about it. The fact that they got what is a glorified second-round pick for that guy, I mean, I swear.
Unbelievable.
I swear to God, I'm telling you, Bean is a killer. He's a stone-cold killer. That guy is cold as ice. There's something. So,
are the Browns going to go in opening day with him as a starter? Is he going to start for the Browns in Week 1?
Our listener, Jason Hicksonbaugh, actually has a bet with
me.
With Chris.
Yeah, we made a bet. Jason thinks Tyrod's going to start next season. I don't think he'll start anywhere.
If Tyrod does, Chris has to drink a Seagram's, and if Jason loses, he has to drink prune juice since he can't have alcohol. It's actually really funny. Now, I'm actually going to be watching their camp battle really, really closely, no matter what they do at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I got a bet with some wise ass on Twitter that if Tyrod starts 4 games or more and averages more than 220 yards per game, I will mail him $20 to buy the nicest 6-pack he can find.
That is, you know what, and you know what, you're a man of your word. I look forward to seeing how that plays out as well.
There's no way that's going to happen. If he starts more than 4 games, there's no chance he's going to average 220 yards or more per game. That's not going to happen.
I don't even think he'll get to 220 yards across totaling his 4 games.
Well, the question would be, who's his left tackle? You know what I mean? Joe Thomas is like, okay, fine, Tyrod Taylor, but I'm out.
Yeah.
So
Joe
now
Thomas
Tyrod
had all those wonderful things to say about Hugh Jackson and Tyrod Taylor. Decided it was too much for him.
And then took a look around. So
also, hold on, time out. Quick live update from the Strangler. The guy in the lane next to me just opened his door and puked.
Oh, Chicago.
I see a lot of things on this drive. I've never seen that before, gentlemen. So you're witnessing history here.
This is hilarious. Folks, for anybody who wants to diss Buffalo about being a dysfunctional place, every city has its moments. And right now, Lars and the Strangler are having theirs. So speaking of left tackles and how it changes things, the reason that the main reason you're here tonight. Now, this is it. Last week, I took you to task on our podcast, and I guess I had a feeling, or at least I had an idea of what I thought your argument was. In terms of early on in the season, you and I went back and forth. We traded a lot of barbs via social media about, because I'm a believer in fair radio, I'm not going to beat anybody up and not give them a chance to, defend them any worse than I already do. I thought I had a handle on it, but I also...
Jason Peters had just gone down in Philly, and everybody knew the Giants were looking for left tackle and beat up, but then had this game in the Buccaneers game. And you have to keep in mind, this was all said without the benefit of hindsight. So now we can look back and say, well, we moved right. And say was we after that. And so at his health line passed when we knew the hungry team deal him, and then we just set him on the he was the most expensive player on our roster.
And so now in that moment, though, I hearts with you, and I stated that you do not the soundbite me and Nate Gear season because they realize that what I'm trying to do is buy its lowest point of value. You're trying to sell it. It's like I said,
third round pick.
He's a guy who can go win 50-50 balls. I think that we stole him at a low point in his value.
Now, knowing now that his value is up to the 12th pick in the draft, that means we probably could have dealt him for a second or third October. And I think everybody would have been okay with that, especially since he didn't play another snap for the rest of the season. So if you want to talk about the low point of his value, well, his value evidently was as high as a first-round pick, which means his value could have been as low as a second or third-round pick, which would have been, at the time, perceived as great value for the Bills.
All right. Okay. Chris, do you have the crow drop ready? If so, you should get it. This is what I'm going to say to you about all of this. I'm going to apologize to you.
Wow.
I'm going to apologize because in my mind, I guess my feeling on the thing was that if I'm a GM and I see this, especially if I'm, hey, I'm Scott, my team, I'm the Eagles, and I just lost Jason Peters. Well, here's a tackle who's been banged up. I don't exactly know what I'm getting. I don't know whether that player is going to end up on the IR by the end of the season. What I do know is the Bills didn't trust him enough to start him until this point in the season and really start, you know what I mean? Like there was that gap there. So when I'm looking at a player on an injury-shortened season.
I know I said, don't use the benefit of hindsight here, and I'm using it in my argument to say, he then did go on IR, and yet he still got us a first-round pick. So you got to think that his value when he was playing and being productive would have still been high.
Well, it's a swap of a first-round pick, though. So his value on its own may not have been a second-round pick. His value combined with a first-round pick and a switch may have been enough to get the deal done. But to your credit, in my mind, Cordy Glenn at that point, I did not see us, and I think I said this to you, I didn't see him getting anything more than a fifth. A fifth-round or a sixth-round conditional pick, based on the number of games he plays, where he starts. So
his injury.
His injury. If we were to trade him and he went on IR, the team receiving him, taking on that cap, there's no. Look at Marcel Darius. We got a fifth-round pick for $16 million in cap space. Cordy Glenn's contract was pretty equivalent to that. So, in my opinion, I thought that he was worth no more than Marcel Darius. Point blank and period. Especially being injured. Because at least Marcel was somewhat productive, and he was healthy. In hindsight, I undervalued the player. And you're correct. If we had traded him at the deadline and netted a second-round pick, I would have been ecstatic. The world would have been happy with it. And it's clear that their value was more than a fifth-round draft pick because otherwise the trade to 12 wouldn't have happened. You don't get that for just a swap of picks. This guy he's a starting left tackle in the NFL. So I apologize to you for beating you up and raking you over the coals because ultimately you didn't quite deserve that. And Chris, I'm ready to eat a healthy helping of crow here.
You're a good man. You're a much bigger man than myself. And I also say, this was also, from my perspective, made a little less of a difficult issue by the fact that Deion Dawkins was playing just fine. I know that you were leaning on you don't get rid of a tackle, but Deion Dawkins, in my opinion, at the time, made him a little more expendable. So apparently that's how they feel now.
Well, that's what makes me feel like more of an ass.
But
that's what makes me feel like more of an ass, is that I banged that drum. You don't get rid of left tackles. And then we got rid of a left tackle. I was like, son of a bitch. We did the thing that I said that you don't do.
Yeah, cherish this apology from Drew. He don't even apologize to his fiance.
I love it. That's going to have to change, but I don't know when the wedding day is, but you better get used to that.
Oh, it's not going to start until well after the draft, my friend.
June 9th.
So, June 9th. No, that's the wedding. Yeah, the wedding's June 9th, but April, what is the first day of the draft? April 26th? I am going to be on a beach in Jamaica, but Lars, I'm going to make an effort to call into your show. I'm going to be live broadcasting my viewing of the draft. And I'm going to be flying solo that night because God knows she doesn't want any part of me watching.
Yeah, and you'll be in a Speedo, so everyone will see your nugget pouch.
I told her if things start going south, I'm putting on a Speedo and everyone needs to stay the hell away from me. Lars, what do you guys got coming up? I know you said that you're going to do a show in a few weeks after that. Is it going to be post-draft, draft night? Do you guys have anything else planned?
It'll be available it'll be available in the middle of the night on Thursday night of the draft because we'll record as soon as the first round ends, and then I'll get it up there. So when you're heading to work on Friday morning, you can toggle back and forth between WGR and our podcast.
Don't bother checking WGR. Just go listen to the Bills and Beers podcast. All right, guys.
So I don't have the privilege of getting it on my dial, but I usually just go to the on-demand section. Unless Sal Capaccio is listed in the menu, I generally just pass anyways.
You're a smart man, Lars. Hey, thanks for joining us. We very much appreciate it.
Love to come on, guys. Keep up the great work. We'll talk soon.
And now, folks, the reason that we are all here today. The offensive and defensive line installment of the Rockpile Report's 2018 draft series, I'd like to think. Now, when I watch the game of football, it gets done, my eyes are just kind of fixated on the trenches first and foremost.
Because you got them long gorilla arms.
Well, no, and I played offensive line as a kid. I understand the mechanics of line play. And to me, that's where a lot of plays begin and end. So it makes sense that on every play, that's where my eyes are glued. When I'm at a game on Sunday in the stadium, I'm watching the lines because I want to see where pressure's coming from, how the quarterback's reacting to it, who's doing what, who's sliding their feet. I mean, it's incredible because that is what dictates the course of play for most of the game. So given that, it's one of the most important parts of a football team is how do you play in the trenches? And I know that that's a trope that gets, people trumpet out there all the time, but it's true. So given that, this is an integral part of the draft, especially when you look at how the Bills are currently constructed. And to help us walk through this, we've got a guest tonight, Russell Brown from Cover1.net. Russ, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, fellas. How you guys doing?
Not too bad.
Yeah, we're doing great. You came highly recommended from Eric Turner.
I don't know why he's doing that. I'm going to let everybody down, but I appreciate him throwing his good work.
And he's humble. So first and foremost, I guess, is it fair to say that you are now running the Cover1.net podcast?
Yes, Cover One the podcast. That is my bread and butter, I guess, as of now. But over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be doing some rebranding on the podcast. Cover One the podcast will change to Cover One Cover One NFL Draft podcast with me and Brad Kelly. And then they will be doing one, Cover One, the Bills podcast. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to name it, but it's going to have Aaron Quinn, Nate Geary, and Eric Turner on it. So it's going to be a couple of good podcasts coming out on Cover1.net, and obviously you can catch it all on Cover1.net.
First and foremost, I want to start on the offensive line. On the O-line, the Bills are returning 4 starters. Deion Dawkins, Richie Incognito, Vlad Dukas, and Jonathan Miller.
And here in Buffalo, everybody would prefer Vlad Dukas would get lost in the woods.
Same.
Well, don't get me started about Miller. And I guess we have a pair of depth players with upside if they're playing in a power scheme, which come down to Jonathan Miller and Ryan Garoy. they've added some veteran depth and some competition in the form of Marshall Newhouse and Russ Bodine, who should at worst be proven but serviceable backups. That being said, the Bills had a left tackle last season when they drafted Deion Dawkins. And given that this is Beane's first draft, it's really hard for us to kind of parse through how he's going to play things when it comes to ranking just overall talent and what to address and what he doesn't view as being important. I mean, you're talking about a guy who drafted a guy to play left tackle when he had a left tackle. And at the same time, we knew Whaley's tendencies. You know, when you're talking about Doug Whaley's pre-draft stuff, he wouldn't draft anybody who wasn't part of his 30 visits. Right. So you kind of had to tell, hey, it's going to be one of these guys. We don't know what to expect with Beane. So given that, I feel like we'd be doing a detriment to not only our listeners, but also ourselves if we didn't talk about what's going on in the offensive line, because there is a possibility that if they have someone as best player available on their board, and that's where their pick happens to fall, it's not outside the realm of possibilities that he could be drafted. So having said that, I don't see one happening early. So what can you say about the depth of this offensive line class?
The interior offensive line, it's fantastic in my personal opinion. I think it's great. Probably the better we've seen it in the last couple of years. And with this team, I mean, you guys know how many picks they have. I mean, you're talking about 4 in the top 56, 5 in the top 65, which is fantastic. And when I look at it, I selfishly don't want them to trade up, despite even if that means going out and getting Josh Rosen, which I would like to see him there, but I would just selfishly want them to stay at 12, see if Allen or Mayfield fall, hoping that it's Mayfield. And let's say you got to move from 12 to 8 or 9, and then you move up, and let's say you give up, pick 12 and 56 or 65 to go up 3 or 4 spots. I can live with that. I don't want to give the King's ransom to get potentially, in a position where you don't get your guy. So, and I know Beane's come out and said, we're not going to move up unless we know we're going to get our guy. So I get that. But if we're talking offensive tackles, I wouldn't be surprised if at 22 they took an offensive tackle. Maybe Connor Williams is there. Maybe Mike McGlinchey is there. I think Connor Williams is the best offensive tackle in this class. I think he's a left tackle. I don't believe the hype of moving him inside. I think he's just, as aggressive as he is, I think his pass blocking skills, as far as his kick step, and everything else that he does in that regard, I think he's good. He's got a solid punch. Hand placement's good. Just really the only thing that's hurting him was that he was injured. So if you can get him at 12 or if you get him at 22, that's fantastic. But as far as the mid rounds, 53, 56, 65, or even 96, I mean, you're probably talking the best fit, Martinez Rankin, offensive tackle from Mississippi State. He's like 6'4", 310. And he's a good enough athlete, I think, to play left tackle. He might move over to the right side and play right tackle. But as far as power run, I think he's your best fit for it. And he's got the athletic ability. He's versatile. So maybe, strength in one-on-ones is a little bit, a problem with them. But I think he can manage it because of good technique, staying square, hands inside, doing those things, down blocks, reach blocks. He excels in that. So Rankin's a guy. And then moving on, maybe Jamarco Jones out of Ohio State. Didn't test off the charts. He wasn't really.
No, I was going to say Jamarco Jones really didn't make a lot of headlines. And that's the thing. Look, we're going through all these tackle names. I guess the thing for me is that you had a tackle who played the left. And when you look at offensive tackles in the draft, you've got a guy in Deion Dawkins who essentially backed up your former starter and made him expendable. So at this point, now they're going in, and I'll tell you, Mills, there's a reason that Jordan Mills has not been upgraded. Well, I mean, they signed Marshall Newhouse to compete with Jordan Mills. But the right tackle position, I've seen guys drafted in the second and third round who become starters pretty much out of the gate at the right tackle position because it's a different technique.
Who was that dude from Cleveland? Was it Schwartz? Like 2 or 3 years
Mitchell
ago?
Schwartz? No,
Mitchell Schwartz.
Yeah, Mitchell Schwartz.
Yeah, he got drafted in like the second or third round, and he was as Doug Whaley would say, it's starter off the bus.
Doug Whaley can kiss the fattest part of my ass. So ultimately, when I'm looking at this, I look at the tackle group, and I guess my question would be to you, if when you look at this offensive line group as a whole, the Bills probably won't be selecting. I mean, I know you talked about McGlinchey maybe falling to 22, but I highly doubt that. And even if it does, there's no, because in my mind, there's still this potential for a massive trade up. So what I'm trying to wrap my head around is, in the second, third, fourth round range, are there any tackles that you think would be, fit a starting right tackle mold out of the box? We draft you, you're going to come in and be a day one starter, kind of like a Mitchell Schwartz. At the right tackle position, I mean, if you had to peg one or two of them, who would you say they'd be?
Well, Martinez Rankin out of Mississippi State. That'd be the guy for sure. I think in the mid rounds, you're probably talking probably third round, to be honest. I don't know. He might go in the second round. But when you get into that, I think into the second round, we're going to see running backs, cornerbacks, receivers go. But if he's there, definitely, like we said, 53, 56. If you spent 56 on him, no harm, no foul, really. And another name would be Brian O'Neill out of Pittsburgh. He's a versatile player, former tight end. He plays left tackle. He lunges a lot. Kick step, not as smooth as you would like. Kind of similar as far as athletic ability to Colton Miller, very athletic in that regard, but Colton Miller is far more superior, but similar athletic ability, still kind of figuring out how to play offensive tackle. So I think if you were to move him over to right tackle, it'd be fine because he used to play right tackle for Pittsburgh. So I think if you got him in the third or fourth round, you're getting a really good value pick, and you're getting a guy that's probably might not start, off the bus, as you will, but he'll probably start down the line. So I like O'Neill for Buffalo or Martinez Rankin.
So now flipping inside, you talked about how you were very high on the interior offensive lineman, and you thought that's where the real depth of the class is. This isn't a position that most Bills fans thought we'd have to address in 2018. We really didn't. We had Eric Wood signed to a 2-year contract extension. We had a promising backup who could possibly grow into a larger role down the road at left tackle, and we had a starter entrenched. Maybe that guy would move to right tackle. Life was good. You fast forward a few months through the NFL season, and it's crazy to me how different the landscape looks across our offensive line. So I guess the question is, when you look across the board, there are some players that I have questions on the interior of the offensive line. Because I don't see us reaching for a tackle. I think they signed Marshall Newhouse to kind of, hedge our bets that no good one falls to us in the draft. But on the interior of the offensive line, you've got a lot of guys with a lot of questions. So given that, I'm going to start my questions here. Billy Price. Before the Combine, he was viewed as the best center prospect in the draft. He tears his bicep, but teams are still high on him.
Yeah, so, no, that opinion shouldn't change.
Is he still the top center in the draft?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I guess the question is, what do you personally think? How badly will this injury set his stock back? And where do you see him going in that first, second round?
Yeah, I wrote about him, a scouting report in depth with a ton of all-22 film breakdowns on there on cover1.net, so definitely check it out under Billy Price. I had a first-round grade on him. He was one of actually our highest-graded players at the time. I believe he was like the 5th or 6th highest player with the grading sheet. And then obviously we've plucked the numbers in for other players, so he's kind of dropped down a little bit, but he's still got the first-round grade. And initially I thought at 21 and 22, if they would have stayed put, which I kind of felt like they weren't going to anyways, but I thought Buffalo at 21-22 would have been a great value pick for them to take him. He's going to fall to the second round. Where he goes, though, I don't think he goes beyond pick 64. I think he stays in round 2. I would be shocked if he's available in round 3. Players sometimes people think that they're going to plummet all the way to day 3 of the draft. I don't think that's going to be the case with him. He's a great run blocker. He's aggressive. He operates well in space. He's versatile. He can play any of the guard spots, any of the center position very well. And his snap to contact quickness is just, and I don't even know if that's like a real thing. I'm making that up just simply because of I watched him snap the ball and just pull and go out and just the contact. Like, it was so fast. And I don't think I've seen somebody move that fast in quite some time, at least not that I can remember. So if he's there in the second round, I think you definitely have to take him at 53 or 56. And I would love to see him in Buffalo. So
he would be a good. I mean, I'm not. Everybody that listens to our show knows that I'm not that smart when it comes to football X's and O's. But from what you just said, it seems like Billy Price would be a decent fit for what I guess our offensive line is going to a pin and pull scheme. So it seems he would fit in great with that.
Yeah, he'd be a great fit for that. And if you can get him, like let's say hypothetically speaking, you're moving up from 12. And let's say they get to 4 with Cleveland, and I don't see the Giants trading back. Gettleman's never traded back ever as a GM, so them potentially working out a deal with Bean and Gettleman. Hey, we used to be boys in Carolina. Let's do something. Granted, I did see them poke jabs at each other in Mobile in the parking lot, and they did say some explicit words to each other. But all good and fun.
So they're boys. All right, that's good to know. See, look, Russ bringing the insider information.
Yeah, I'm an insider. So definitely they know each other. We know that, and that's kind of been speculated for quite some time that maybe the Giants and the Bills will go ahead and make a trade. Realistically, I think maybe Cleveland at 4 would trade back, or maybe Indy again at 6. But I think getting in front of Denver is kind of Buffalo's goal. So the way to do that is by getting to 4. So if they do that, they would probably have to give up 12, 22, let's say 53, and maybe a first next year or a second next year.
But that still leaves you your thirds and your second. And that's why I'm so interested in this mid-tier pack of players. Yeah. Because and that's why I started with Billy Price. Do you think that there's an opportunity? Because if so, he's obviously the standout at center in this class. But with the tearing of the bicep, I feel like, I don't know. I just feel like his stock may drop just enough that he could end up in that second round discussion where if we still have a pick there, we could take him.
Yeah, if he's there, you got to take him. And if, like I said, if they got rid of 12, 22, and 53 to get up to 4, there they take either Josh Rosen or Josh Allen, or maybe even Baker Mayfield, just to ensure that they get their guy. If they do that, you still sit there at 56 and 65. Those picks aren't that far apart. They're 9 picks away from each other. But at 56, if let's say you went a quarterback at 4. And then at 56, you went Billy Price. That's a home run, in my opinion, because you're getting a top 25 player in the draft at 56. And
that makes us like the Green Bay or Indianapolis of centers, because Green Bay goes from Favre to Rodgers, and Indianapolis goes from Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck. We're that for centers. We could go from Eric Wood to Billy Price.
That's a great comp.
Now let me ask you. One of our listeners asked Chris, it was the intro to our show. We were talking about
we have a listener in England that requested Will Hernandez out of UTEP.
This is the question. At guard, the Bills have questions. I mean, Richie Incognito, he's getting older. He's not a spring chicken, and he just agreed to a pay cut just to not be released from the team. So, having said that, Will Hernandez, guard out of UTEP, Mike Mayock in our intro talked about how he's been compared to Richie Incognito with his physical playing style, the nastiness that he finishes his blocks with.
Mauler in the run game.
What can you tell us about him, and where do you project him to end up in the draft?
I've got a second round grade on him. I think he'll go in round 2. I would be shocked if he was available in round 3 because he's a phone booth type of player. That's kind of the scouting term that people love to use for a guy.
One-on-one, he'll fist fight you to death, if you may.
Yeah, and and when he was at the Senior Bowl, he measured in apparently at 340 pounds, and we're standing on the sidelines, and it was okay. He's every bit of 340 pounds. Then we get to the combine, and he's 327 pounds. So he cut 13 pounds, and he ran a 5.15 40. Wow. And 3-cone drill, 20-yard shuttle. Those numbers never really matter too much. Obviously, if the guy's running in incredible numbers, then you are like, okay, wow. But at 327 pounds, I'm not expecting him to run a 6.5 second 3-cone drill, but he ran a 7.59, which is puts him in the 78th percentile of all players in the scouting combine.
He's an explosive athlete, and he's a big man. He's physical, and he plays with a nastiness to him.
Yeah, 37 reps in the bench. So if they got him in the second round, that'd be a great addition as well. I think if you had, Incognito and Hernandez at left guard, right guard, best of luck to the interior defensive linemen that are trying to rush that, because I don't think you're getting by it.
Now, one of me personally, one of the guys I was most interested in, Isaiah Wynn out of Georgia. I watch a ton of SEC football. I'm an Alabama fan. Wynn was a solid run blocker and a pass protector for the Bulldogs this season. I mean, he paved the way for Chubb and Michelle while also keeping Fromm upright. I mean, that's look at how dynamic that offense was. He's been talked about as having the ability to play almost any offensive line position. But at the same time, people note that his lack of height and arm length, he should fit best as an interior lineman. I mean, what do you think of him? I mean, they say he can play tackle, center, or guard. Where do you see his best fit? And what round do you think he ends up being taken in?
We got videos from Turner.
Yeah,
from
Turner at the Senior Bowl, him just
owning people. So, I mean, I'm sure you saw the same stuff at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was standing right next to the guy. He's a right guard, in my personal opinion. That's where he excelled the most in Mobile. He measured in at 6'2", just under 6'3", 313 pounds. Arms were at 33 3/8, so not bad. But people saying that he's a left tackle, I'm sorry. I get it. That's what he played. Give him an opportunity there. Like last year, I thought Deion Dawkins was going to be a left guard. I thought he was perfect fit for it. He's playing left tackle. He's going to be the franchise left tackle with the Buffalo Bills, pending, performing well and staying upright. But with Isaiah Wynn, I mean, I think he's a right guard. That lateral quickness, his footwork is fantastic. His punch is great. His burst off the line of scrimmage. He was by far one of the best players down there, and I think he's a first-round player. I wouldn't be surprised if he was taken in the top 20. Detroit at number 20, if they took him, I wouldn't even care. I wouldn't even, you don't want to see guards taken in the first round, hence Lincoln Tomlinson when the Lions took him. But I would love to see Isaiah Wynn as a Detroit Lion, but I wouldn't be surprised if, Seattle took him at 18, potentially, maybe the Cardinals at 15. So
there's a lot of teams with needs that could use him to fill a lot of different gaps in their offensive line. He's a very versatile player, and you think the demand for that guy is going to be high.
Yeah, and with how versatile he is, and like you said, he's versatile, and with that demand, I think he's going to be a player that's highly coveted in the draft. I'd be shocked if he was available in round 2 of the draft, but crazier things have happened. I was pretty high on Jason Spriggs when he came out of Indiana, and Green Bay got him in the second round. So,
and I got one sleeper of mine that I have to ask you about. One sleeper of mine that I have got to ask you. And that's Bradley Bozeman, center from Alabama.
Yeah.
Call me a homer, but I like some of the things about Bozeman's game. I mean, Russ, I watched a ton of him this season, and there was a reason for optimism. I mean, he showed some flashes when he filled in 2016, and Ryan Kelly leaving, it's like, okay, he's been groomed behind a good center. They wouldn't be Alabama thrives up front, so they wouldn't be starting this kid if they didn't think he could ball.
Yeah.
Physically, I'll say this, he's got some limitations. I'm sure you know if you've seen him play. He's got slow feet, and he really doesn't ever get to the second level of a defense on a regular basis. I mean, that's just not his game.
No.
And I think that a lot of that is just poor technique with his initial block. That's my critique of watching a ton of him play. I get angry because I'm like, you could just shed that block and get out there to that linebacker, but you don't. You're just stuck there.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like a mental processing thing with him where is it him not wanting to excel and get into the second level? I'm assuming he would want to, but it just seems like there's times where he's supposed to be keying in on a certain block and he misses it. And I think a lot of it is because of the limitations athletically. But when he approaches the second level, I thought he did a very poor job at that. And if there wasn't a one technique or a zero shade right there, it was pretty much, okay, this guy's not
this guy's not going to block anybody unless somebody's running right at him,
What I do like about his game, though, is that when he does have somebody running right at him, he can keep them upright. He doesn't really get blown backwards. It's one of those. He's athletically limited enough that he can't get outside. He really struggles to make dynamic plays, but at the same time, I don't see a lot of mistakes from him. And I'm wondering if you think that any of these can be kind of worked through, because he's viewed as a late round pick or an undrafted free agent. But I'm just looking at in terms of having worked with Brian Daboll. Daboll knows what he's getting in this guy. So if they were to take him in the late rounds of the draft, if they completely avoid him, I'd understand it, because they'd be like, "Oh Jesus, get me away from this guy." But having said that, I'm just curious to hear what you thought about him.
Well, yeah, like we said, getting to the second level, very, very just slow, not getting there fast enough, slow feet. I personally, I don't know if I'd be drafting him. I saw him in Mobile a little bit, and I was not that impressed with him. I thought, okay, he's a little bit of a mauler. Guy's there, like I said, one technique, zero shade. Guy's right there. He does okay. But, he anchors late, lower body strength. He got the thick build for it. I mean, the guy's like 315, 320 pounds. But it's just really, there's no drive. There's no, you have a guy upright and you've got, the length to play the position, but there's no leg drive. There's no getting the guy into the ground. And I really wonder, outside of a down block, can he reach block? Can he pull? I mean, Billy Price is pulling as a center. He's going to trap you. Can Bozeman do that? I don't know. And if he plays against a guy like Mo Hurst, who's a very, very good, in my opinion, top 10 talent in this class, and you're talking about a guy that's probably going to play a one technique or a three technique somewhere. Is he going to be able to trap a guy with that versatility, a guy with that quickness? I don't know. So if you put it in Buffalo's terms, if they're sitting there at 173 and they've addressed a ton of needs and got their quarterback and done everything that they needed to do, if Bozeman's there, okay, sure, take him, get him familiar with Dabble and all those things. But I wouldn't be surprised if he was an undrafted kid. I'm not trying to,
No, listen, it happens. Now, I'm switching sides of the ball. As far as drafting along the defensive lines go, that's where things really get interesting for me. I mean, we'll start at defensive end, because kind of like offensive tackle, this seems like something that just not in the team's draft wheelhouse. I mean, our current defensive end position features a lot of familiar faces. I'm looking at the list right now. Out of the 8 defensive ends on the roster, there's only 2 of them. Free agent acquisition Trent Murphy, and this mercurial, kind of mysterious whatever the hell your last name is. Former Giants 3rd round pick.
Hello, I've never heard of you before.
He's one of the last guys. I can't pronounce his last name to save my life, but for whatever reason, these are the only 2 guys who weren't a part of our roster at the start of training camp last year. They've brought back a ton of old bodies. Marquavius Lewis. He's a big man playing defensive end who could almost arguably play defensive tackle. There's a lot of bodies at the defensive end position right now. So considering the number of them on the roster and the staff's familiarity or financial investment in most of them, it seems like this is the group they're going to go into training camp with. So I don't expect the team to spend a lot of draft capital at that position unless a great player really does fall to them. Given that, I've got to ask the question, just about the class as a whole. When you look at it from top to bottom, the defensive ends, the pass rushers, the edge setters, anybody who can play in a 3-4, what do you think about it in terms of top-end talent to, just late-round guys who might still be able to contribute?
The top of the draft, very, very good. I mean, you got Bradley Chubb, Harold Landry. Those guys, I think, are going to be elite. I've got top 10 grades on them. I would not be surprised to see those guys in Pro Bowls, double-digit sack numbers. Bradley Chubb with, 15, 20 tackles for loss on a year with his power to speed game and his bend and things like that. And the explosiveness out of Harold Landry, absolutely. He's going to win with that. He needs to become more consistent with his hands. He needs to do a little bit of a better job with his bend in squeezing things down. There's times where he's playing out of position. He's supposed to maintain his gap on the outside shoulder. He's and rather than squeezing it down, he's crossing the face of the offensive tackle and trying to bounce it back outside to make the tackle. So that's kind of an issue with him that I've noticed. But I still like him enough that I would take him top 10 because of his explosiveness, the way he flips his hips, and when he puts it all together and he's not playing hurt, he's fantastic. So Landry and Chubb definitely are the top 2 guys. Marcus Davenport, still very raw. I don't think he knows what position he wants to play as far as stand-up edge rusher role or with his hand in the dirt, because in Mobile they had him all over the place, but he didn't really flash. He was inconsistent with his hands, playing high, had a nice, punch, but that was really it. There was no really flipping the hips. There was really no bend. There was not squeezing stuff down. So he's going to be kind of a project. I think he's a little bit raw. I think he's more raw than Ziggy Ansah, and that's his, pro comp.
I was going to say, everyone keeps comparing him to Ziggy Ansah. But Ansah, I feel like he was more of an athletic freak. I mean, is that fair?
Yeah, he was more athletic, and he's more an athletic player. He's an extreme athlete, whereas Davenport, he's got the build to stop the run, but he doesn't do it consistently enough because he lacks that bend and squeezing things down and working his hands because he's playing high and he's leaving his chest plate wide open. So he's a guy that I still think you could draft in the first round. After that, you've got Arden Key. I'll be honest, work ethic issues, motor issues, I question that every time. And I don't, people make up these excuses for players. Oh, well, he played hurt and he gained 20 pounds. Well, there's the problem. The guy was playing at 228 pounds. Next thing you know, he's playing at 242 pounds. And he measured in at 238 pounds, if I remember correctly, at the combine. And so, when I look at those,
when I look at that, I see a player who, if you can't play at above, like that was my issue with Trent Murphy, the free agency side.
Aaron Maben.
Yeah, and my thing is when you struggle, as a 4-3 defensive end, you are going to struggle. If you're 250 pounds, you're going to have a hard time playing defensive end in a 4-3 defense. So when I look at a lot of these defensive ends, I don't see anybody really outside of the top few who could really contribute to this class, or at least contribute in the next year or two to the Buffalo Bills, which is why I really don't expect it to be drafted.
Now we re-signed Kyle Williams to a 1-year deal, and then we also have we just signed Star Latulele. I think that's exactly how you pronounce it. We're going to get shit from our listeners for the next 5 years of mispronouncing his name. And then you also have Adolphus Washington on the roster, who is not a product of Brandon Beane. And he also had that incident at the water park last year, so you don't really know where he lies with this management group. What can you say about the defensive tackle class as a whole for this draft?
It's fantastic. It's deep. It's everything that you want and more out of a defensive tackle class. I mean, you're talking Vita Vea at the top with Maurice Hurst at the top with Vita Vea and Taven Bryan. Taven Bryan, a very athletic player, explosive, plays undisciplined at times as far as getting too deep in the backfield and doing those things. If he can fix that, but with that burst and the things that he does with the point of attack and flipping his hips and bending and just pursuing to the football, the high motor of Taven Bryan, I really like him as the third best defensive tackle. And then behind him, you talk to Ron Payne. Everybody loves Deron Payne.
Damn straight we do. Roll Tide!
Such a homer. And you've got... behind that, you've got guys that I really like. Andrew Brown out of Virginia, who I list as a defensive tackle. I think he'd be a perfect fit as a 3 technique. He played out of position for Virginia as a defensive end in a 3-4, constantly lining up in a 5 technique. So if you play him in a 3 technique, I think you're getting your bang for your buck on him, especially because he ran in the 5s with the 40-yard dash at the combine. But he's an explosive player. His burst was insane in Mobile, but he does a really good job maintaining his gap, working his hands, bending, and squeezing things down as well. So I really like him as a 3 technique at the next level. I think you could probably get him relatively in the middle to early part of day 2. You're probably talking mid-second, early round 3. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if I saw him much sooner, and I selfishly would like to see him in the first round somewhere. But also, you've got the guy I've been just super high on the last couple of days, and I talked about him on Midday 180, was Justin Jones out of NC State. I think this guy is going to be a real, I can't even say a sleeper because I think enough people know about him, and I've been talking about him enough. But Justin Jones is a 3 technique at 6'2", 308. He's fantastic. He does everything right. He's a technician. He's not going to be the fastest guy in the room, right? Well, he shouldn't be. He's a 3 technique at over 300 pounds. But,
here's the thing. We're used to that, though. I mean, you're talking about a team that watched a guy get drafted in the 5th round and become Today, I took a look through our defensive tackle drafts over the course of the last decade. Kyle Williams might be the best one we've drafted besides Marcel Darius in the middle of the defensive line, and he was a 5th-round draft pick. They took a flyer on a guy late who he didn't have all the explosive measurables, but what he did have was that he was technically sound and he was a hard worker. And he became the only. It's like that movie 10 Little Indians. You can draft all the defensive tackles you want and parade them around Kyle Williams, but at the end of the day, there was only one little Indian left sitting on the hill, and it was him. And so now I'm looking at our roster and I'm saying we landed Starlo Lele. And we've got Kyle Williams. And those guys are both going to be here next season, which gives us a pair of experienced players pretty much known for their run-stopping ability. Outside of that, everything goes to shit. As of today, we literally have half as many defensive tackles as defensive ends on the roster. And the only one with NFL experience is Adolphus Washington. And he's been up and down over the course of his career. So here's my question for you. Some of these guys, we are not going to have a ton of top draft capital to put into the draft, but I've got a couple guys that I guess that I'm high on and that I want to know more about the class in the late rounds because I feel like we're going to have to hope that we can find some guys who can contribute farther on down the draft. First and foremost, my first question to you, R.J. McIntosh out of Miami. He's being touted as one of the highest, when you talk about a 5 technique or a 3 technique, he's one of those guys that they talk about as being a upper echelon prospect. What's your feeling on that?
I like him. I mean, I think the thing that I've seen, I watched a lot of him when I was watching Chad Thomas, the defensive end out of Miami. I really wonder where he is as far as strength goes. I think there's things, as far as lower body strength that he looks limited in. He doesn't really have, a whole lot of pass rush moves with them. But there was a lot because he wasn't so much rushing the passer as an interior offensive lineman or an interior defensive lineman. He was more so, stopping the run and doing those things. And I like that because he reads it well. He mental processing is there. He does a really good job as far as punching and then reading and kind of keeping that head on, outside shoulder, inside shoulder, wherever he may be. He gets skinny as far as, splitting double teams and the quick get off is definitely a big plus for him. So he's a plus athlete. I think, probably a day 3 kid, probably in that 4th round tier, maybe 5th round if he falls a little bit, if there's a run on a specific position like the running backs or receivers, because I fully expect there to be a run on that specific, those two specific positions.
I mean, when you're talking about the defensive tackle position, it's deep in this draft, but it's going to happen. There's going to be the run on the interior linemen, both on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball. And I'm sure that placement's going to be strategic based on who's in what division and what that team's needs are. The teams drafting stud interior defensive linemen are probably going to see their division opponents drafting stud interior linemen to try to keep up. It's going to be, I envision an arms race happening here as far as the interior line goes. Now, one of the players that's curious to me because the Bills have already met with him is Harrison Phillips out of Stanford. To me, everyone fears a 1-year wonder at quarterback. Phillips hasn't been quite that, but he also hasn't been a steady presence throughout his collegiate career, or at least from what I can tell. But scouts seem to love him. Can you tell me why?
Well, you're getting a plus-size guy because he got the thick build that you want out of a defensive lineman, especially on the interior. He's strong. He had 42 reps in the bench. He's 6'3", 307. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Kyle Williams when I watched him. And I watched a great deal of him before he went to Mobile and then saw him firsthand. So, there's not the explosiveness that you want as far as the athlete goes. But he ran a 7.28 in his 3-cone drill. So his hips, they're not stiff. He does a really good job as far as taking a double team, splitting it, or at least, fighting it and dropping right to the ground and creating a pile there, which is very key for defensive tackles to do, and he does a really good job with it. He reads as far as, reach blocks, down blocks. He has a good feel for it, so he can squeeze stuff down, and he can penetrate the backfield. He's not – the biggest issue is he doesn't really have an arsenal of pass rush moves. It's just more so he relies on his strength, get out of my way, and I'm going to bury you to the ground. But I think he'd be a really good fit for this team, but I just don't know if he's going to be there when they want to draft him, because I think he's going to probably be a second, maybe at worst a third-round pick.
The last two guys I want to ask you about, I feel like they're going to be later-round prospects. Maybe their stock has dropped a little bit since the Combine. First and foremost, Maurice Hurst. He's one of the most interesting stories at defensive tackle this offseason. I mean,
the first thing you got to ask about is what is his health situation?
Well, I feel like he was cleared, and that should give most scouts, that should give them confidence, correct?
Well, didn't Michigan already have their pro day?
Yes.
Yeah, he's cleared. He's good.
He is cleared and good to go. Now, here's where my concerns start for him. I mean, he was being talked as a first-round draft pick. Then at the same time, you go to walterfootball.com or you go to some of these other draft prep websites, and they have him touted everywhere on the board. And they've got quotes from scouts saying, we see him as a late-round draft. We see him as a late-round prospect, but he'll get overdrafted. That's scary to me. So when I look at what Maurice Hurst out of Michigan is, he seems light for a defensive tackle. I mean, the guy's only 280 pounds and 6'2". So no matter how, I know the thing that everybody loves about him is the fact that he has a fast get off. They say, when the it's like a track meet. When the ball gets snapped, he's just so fast off the snap. Well, guess what? This is the NFL. This isn't college. You're not going up against a bunch of second-tier centers. You're going up against the best of the best. And at only 280 pounds, 285, maybe he can pack on some weight at the NFL level. But only 6'2" at that weight. I mean, I don't think you can hold up to NFL caliber double teams and just some of the league's better centers. I mean, would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I guess for the most part. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a big Mo Hurst fan. So
really?
He's a top 10 player on my board. I think he's fantastic.
Wow.
And I get the whole undersized type of thing. He measured in at 292. 6'1" is where he's pretty much officially listed at. And he reminds me a lot of Louis, who also was 6'1", and he was just under 300 pounds, and he was the 12th pick of the draft to the New Orleans Saints. Now, has he been, everything that they've wanted? No. Not so much. He's been fairly good.
He's
and
okay.
It's not because,
I wouldn't call him great.
But, with Mo Hurst, that explosiveness is fantastic. The way he feels for the game, I mean, he can split double teams. He can feel reach blocks and down blocks. Does he need to do it more consistently? Yes. There's times where he's getting double teamed or reach block and he turns his back to it. I cannot stand when I see players do that. And just thinking about it, I was like gritting my teeth thinking about it. But he's fast off the ball. That burst is great. He's going to create, as far as a sub-package interior rusher, he's going to create pressures on the quarterback. He's going to stop the rush. I don't see why you wouldn't take him. Obviously, you think, okay, where's the heart at? How does that check out? I'm assuming, these scans and everything else that he went through is going to be sent to every team across the league, and he might push down outside of the top 10, and he might not go until later in the first round. But if he didn't go in the first round, I'm going to be honest, I would be completely shocked, and I would hope that one of my teams trades up and gets him, because he would be a steal in round 2.
And then the last prospect I want to pick your brain on, my personal favorite heading into this draft, at least for the Buffalo Bills, Derek Nottie. Okay? To me personally, I'm a bargain shopper. Okay, when I come to free agency, I'm looking for bargains. He's one of my favorite prospects in terms of his value. From everything I've read, it just seems like people doubt his overall athleticism and explosion, which is pushing him down draft boards. But at the same time, I've watched a lot of college football, and in the FSU games I've seen, he stands out time and time and time again. So I guess metrics aside, he's constantly making plays, and a lot of it starts above the shoulders for me. I mean, when you watch him Eric Turner just posted a very good breakdown of Nadi. I brought the question up to him, and he actually included my tweet in one of his montages. You'll see him time and time again properly diagnose a running play, disengage from his block with an ease that makes it look he just gets away from it. All of a sudden, he's not blocked anymore. And move laterally in a way that when people talk about him possibly being a 4th or 5th round draft pick, I'm like, I see movement out of this guy that you don't see out of a lot of D tackles. I mean, what's your opinion of his athleticism?
Well, it's weird. It's because, like you look at his test scores, he ran an 8.15 in the 3-cone drill, which is just awful. 5.38 in the 40-yard dash. Now, I don't put a ton of stock into these numbers, but I know NFL GMs do, and their scouts do, and their coaches do, and these numbers do kind of value where a player is athletically. So it does show, okay, Nadi's not the most gifted player athletically, but at 6'1", 317, is there the undersize as far as the height goes? Absolutely. Same thing that we're going to knock Mo Hurst for, you got to knock Derek Nadi for. But at 317, he's a thick-built guy, he's got a wide base, he's going to sustain his gap, maintain that gap, and he's going to do a good job. I think he's going to be a great 2-gapper at the next level. And he can stick and shed blocks very well. He plays below pad level, and I think that's the biggest thing about him is athletically, no, he's not there. He's not amongst guys like Vita Vea, Taven Bryan, Mo Hurst. But I think as far as the lateral agility, like we talk about, the footwork there, he's got that. Low pad level, he's got that. The technique is there. So when the technique is there, you can get faster. You can get stronger. And he's already strong. I mean, he put up 25 reps in the bench. So I think the things with him, there's a ton of plus upside to him. And I would not, I would think 3rd round, 4th round for him is where I would value him. Late day 2, early day 3 of the draft. And he would be a guy that he's a good football player. He's not athletically gifted. But, mental processing's got to get a little faster. There's times that he's not shedding blocks fast enough. But overall, he's a football player. He'd be a great fit in Buffalo just because he's a football player. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's it. No, I was going to say, to quote the GM of the Browns, Dorsey, we need football players. And I'll tell you, at a position that only has three guys with NFL experience, and the fact that they're not moving into, we talked a little bit earlier on the show about how the market is cooled right now in free agency. There's a ton of defensive tackle talent, and the Bills haven't hosted any of it. Why? I think the plan is to try to find some late steals in this draft. That's why we talk about all this. Russ, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah,
where can we find your work?
I appreciate you guys having me on. At Russ NFL Draft on Twitter is where you can find me. Ton of bad takes, bad GIF usage there. I just suck at using them at poor times. But yeah, there's bad takes there. There's film breakdowns as much as I possibly can. Links to the articles, me standing up for my co-hosts when they're getting bashed by other guys on there. And then obviously cover1.net. Check it out all the time. Just recently wrote some draft options for the New York Jets, which is obviously a big rival for us in the Buffalo Bills. But
you should take that and bury it because guess what? Their GM might actually crib off of you and just scrap his original plan. God knows McCagnon's a bum.
I hope he does. I mean, it's all quarterbacks anyways. But, yeah, other than that, yeah, cover1.net, at Russ NFL Draft.
2 guests. We haven't had 2 guests in a while. We had Lars from Bills and Beers. He's on Twitter, at Bills and Beers. And then we covered the offensive line, defensive line with Russ Brown. He's at Russ NFL Draft on Twitter. Make sure you follow both of those people. Drew, I think we got a good handle on what's available in the draft tonight on the offensive and defensive line.
I think so too. And Chris, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how the rest of this draft plays out.
It is because we have so many picks. Are we going to trade? We won't know until the end of April if we're going to do that.
Upcoming this next month, we have Quarterback Central. It's going to be Quarterback Central over here at the Rockpile Report because Chris is convinced that we're going to be drafting a quarterback, and he's just chomping at the bit to say that it's what, Allen?
I would be fine with Josh Allen.
Oh, my God. I'll put a beer in each one of my hands, and I'll throw myself down your stairs. Mark my words.
Okay, well, it's only...
That's a bet. That's not even a Seagram's bet. I will throw myself down your stairs. Okay, that's the bet.
Yeah, okay, well, that's only 3 stairs. It's only 3 stairs. I guess to give everybody an outline of our show over the next couple weeks. Next week, we're gonna talk about the linebackers in the draft, and then after that, we'll get into the quarterbacks in the draft over 2 shows.
We're going to have a lot of guests. It's going to be a lot of fun. Stick around for it. Guys, I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. And this has been the Rockpile.